Hi everyone, welcome to the One Code Camp channel. So today, we're going to dive deep into one of the most fundamental hooks in React, which is the useState. So whether you're a beginner or just someone who's looking to solidify your understanding, this video is for you. So by the end of this video, you'll be comfortable using useState in your projects. So let's get started. All right, so let's jump right into it. First, let's talk about what hooks are and why they're useful. So React hooks, these are powerful addition introduced in React version 16.8. So they allow functional components to tap into or hook into features like state management and side effects, which were previously exclusive to class-based components. So this means that you can write cleaner, more concise code without the need for classes. The most common hook, which is the useState hook, it lets you manage state data directly within functional components. So this will open up a world of possibilities for creating dynamic and interactive user faces or user interfaces using functional components. Okay, so today in this video, we will focus on useState, which is the most commonly used hook. But what exactly is a useState? So traditionally, React used classes to manage state. However, functional components, which is the more recent approach one, it doesn't have a built-in state management. So this is where the useState hook comes in. It's a special function provided by React that allows you to manage state within functional components. And by using useState, you can create variables or state variables and functions to update them, giving you control over the data that is displayed by your component. Okay, so React components, these are building blocks of your user interface, and they determine what shows up on the screen and how it behaves. But how do these components know what data to display and when to update it? So that is where the state comes in. So states in React, imagine state as the data that controls what's rendered on the screen by a React component. And then this data can be anything from a simple number to a complex object containing user information or game data. So the state determines the component's current condition and what the user sees. And the useState hook, this is a built-in React hook that allows you to add state to functional components. It takes an initial value for the state as an argument and then returns an array containing two elements, which are the first, the current state. This is the current value of the state variable. You can access and use this value within your component's JSX to display information or perform calculations. And then the second one is the state update function. So this function allows you to update the state value. So whenever you need to change the state, you call this function and then React will re-render the component with the updated data. So to understand it more, we will be exploring different examples of React simple projects using useState. And to use the useState hook, we first need to import it from React. But before that, let's start by setting up a simple React project. Okay, so now let's create the project ourselves. So open your Visual Studio Codes and then navigate to the folder where you want to save your project. So here, I want to save it inside my ReactJS folder. And then to create our project, let's open the terminal. And then we will be using the command npx create -react app and then your project directory or your project folder name. So here, I will be using quotes and then enter. So we already encountered this before in our previous videos. Let's just wait for the Visual Studio Code to finish creating the folder. Okay, so now it's done creating our project folder. Now let's navigate inside our project folder. So cd books and then let's npm start. So this will we just created our React project, and then we also started the development server using the command npm start. Okay, so now let's start with the basic useState example. So we will start by creating a simple counter component. So to do that, inside your source folder, create a new folder named components. And then inside the components folder, let's create a new folder named useState. Okay, just so we have an organized folder with each different type of hooks that we will be exploring later on. Okay, and then inside our useState folder, let's create a new file named basic useState.js. Okay, and then here in our basic useState.js file, this is where we will be creating our counter component. So let's start by importing the React and then the useState. So import React and then the useState from React. Okay, and then let's define our functional component named the basic useState. Oops. And then inside this function, let's use the useState hook. So let's declare the state. So let's use the const counter or count, then set count, and then equal to useState 0. Okay, so inside the function, we use the useState hook. It returns an array containing 2 elements. The first one is the count. So this variable stores the current state value, and this one is initially set to 0. And then this second element, this is the set count function. So this function allows us to update the state value. Okay, and then after that, let's have the return statement. And then inside this return statement, let's have the div. And then let's have a paragraph here. We have click count types. And then after the paragraph, let's create a button. So button on click. Okay, function set count plus 1. Okay, and then let's display click me. And then again, don't forget to export our function. Export default basic useState. Okay, so here also you can see anything in our browser, right? You can see the program that we just did. Now what we want to do is we want to import this component into our app.js to display it in our React application. So here in our app.js, let's remove this logo. And then let's import basic useState from, and then the file location. Okay, and then here inside the return statement, let's remove everything. And then let's have here a div. And then let's call on the basic useState component. So this is where we use the imported component. Okay, and as you can see here in our browser, you now have here the paragraph. You click 0 times and then the click me. Some margin here so that it's not being displayed at the very edge of our browser. So let's go to our index.css and then change this margin to 10 pixels. Okay, there you go. Okay, so now here in this example, we can see that we declared a state variable count and then a function setCount to update our state variable. So this is where we declare a state variable named count and a function setCount to update it. Okay, so we begin by importing the useState from the React library. So this hook allows us to manage state within functional components. And then after that, we define a functional component named basic useState. So this is where our application logic resides. And then inside the function, this line right here, we are using here the useState hook. So the useState takes an initial value, which is the 0, and returns an array containing 2 elements. So we destructure the array into the count, which is the current state value, and then the setCount, which is the function to update the state. And then after that is we have the JSX return. So we return a JSX or the JavaScript code that defines the user interface elements. So we have here the div element. So it contains the counter, display, and then the button. So we created a container element. And then after that, we have the paragraph. So it displays the paragraph with the current count value using this string interpolation right here. And then after that is we have the button element. So it triggers the click event. So the onClick attribute right here, it defines what happens when the button is clicked. So the function passed to the onClick updates the count state using the setCount function. Okay, so what happens here is that the useState hook allows us to manage data within a functional component. So this is without needing classes. And then when the component renders initially, the useState 0 sets the count state to 0. So the setCount function, this is used to update the count value. So clicking this button, every time you click this click me button, as you can see, it triggers the onClick event on the button. So when the button is being clicked, the function passed on the onClick, which is this one, is being triggered. Okay, we also use as here an arrow function to update the state. So it calls the setCount, count plus 1. This increments the current count by 1 and then updates the state. Okay, so the React, it pre-renders the component with the updated count value reflected here in the paragraph. Since the state has changed, the component automatically re-renders with the update count value displayed on the paragraph. Okay, so that's it for the basic useState example. So here we just imported our basic useState components, and by importing these components, it allows us to organize our code and create reusable functionalities. So the app.js, this is the component that acts as the main entry point for our application, just like what we discussed in our previous videos. You can also import here and use various components within the app.js to build the complete user interface. Okay, so by importing these components, we can structure our React applications efficiently and then maintain a clean code base just like what we did again in our previous videos. Okay, so here again, every time you click the button, you can see that it updates the count value. Okay, very simple, right? But there's more that we can do with a useState. Okay, so like for example, sometimes you need to manage more than one piece of state, right? So let's extend our example to manage both a count and a name. Okay, but before that, let's have an H3 here first. Let's say basic useState example. There you go. So now for our second example, let's have the multiple state variables. So another H3, say multiple state variable. Okay, so here is where we will be extending our example to manage both account and then a name. Okay, so let's create a new file inside our useState folder, and then let's name it multiple variables.js. And then let's use the emmet shortcut, which is the REFCE. Here you go. And then let's import as well the useState hook, since we will be using that in our project. Okay, so here we will have two state variables, which are the count and then the name. So the input here is that the input field, it would update the name state, and then the button updates the count state. Okay? So let's remove this multiple variables. And then here, before the return statement, let's declare our variables. So const set count let's also have here another const for the name, and then set name. useState this should be an equal. Okay, and then here inside our return statement, let's have here a paragraph. Again, let's call on the name. Say you clicked count times. And then after that, let's have the input field. So the input,
That's happening here.
And then after that, let's have the input field. So input type is equals to text. And then let's have a placeholder. Say enter your. And then let's have here the value, which should be the name. And then the onChange event. Then after that, let's have the button. So button on click. Set count plus 1. Okay, and then let's display here the click me button. Okay, I think this should be the name. I don't know. This should be the set name. Sorry for that. Set name, and then let's have the target the target that value, which is the name. Okay, there you go. So we now have two state variables, which are the count and then the name. So similar to the previous lesson, we also imported the React and then the useState hook. Okay, so this multiple variables component, it defines this defines a functional component named multiple variables. And then we also have here this const count set count is equal to useState. This creates a state variable named count with an initial value of 0 and a function set count to update the count. Okay, and then after that, we also have this line. This creates another state variable named name with an initial value of an empty string and the function set name to update the name. And then we can also notice how we use this useState hook twice to create separate state variables. Okay? And then here in our return statement, we just rendered the UI elements or the user interface elements. This paragraph, this just displays a dynamic content based on both the name and then the count state variables. And then we also have here the input. So we created an input field for the user to enter their name. So the value, this one, the value is equals to name. This binds the current name state value to the input field. And this onChange E set name, E the targeted value, this handles the changes in the input field. So when the value changes, the set name function is called with the new value from the input. And then lastly, we created a button. So this button increments the count whenever it is clicked. Okay, so let's view it or let's see it in our browser. So again, in your main application file, which is the app.js, let's import the multiple variables and then let's call it here after our h3. Oops, we have an error in line 5. Oh, it should be useState. So there's a typo. And there you go. You can now see here an empty string and you click 0 times. Okay? So here, let's enter your name. Let's say this would be Alice. So as you can see, whatever you entered here in our input field, it will also be the one that will be displayed here in our name state. And then whenever you click this button, click me, this count right here will also be updated. Okay, so what happens here is that this code demonstrates managing multiple states within a single component using the useState. So we have two independent state variables, which are the count. So this is for the click count, and then the name for the user input. So each of this state variable has its own initial value, which is for the counts, it's 0, and then for the name, it's an empty string. And each of these also have an update function, which are the set count and then the set name. So whenever the button is clicked, the count is incremented using the set count. And as the user types in the input field, the onChange event handler updates the name state using the set name. And since the state has changed, the component re-renders reflecting the updated count and then the name values in our user interface. Okay, for example, let's say here it would be Joseph. So it will also be updated here in the paragraph that we have here. So whenever you click this button, it will also update the count. Okay, so this is how we manage multiple pieces of state independently in a functional component. And that's it for our introduction to the useState hook. So we've walked through the basics, seen how to create a basic useState example, and even explored an example with multiple variables. So these examples should give you a good foundation to start experimenting with the useState in your own projects. Okay, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. In the next part of this series, we'll dive deeper into some advanced topics. We'll explore the initial state and function updaters. We'll learn how to update state based on previous state and manage complex state objects. So these concepts will help you handle more sophisticated scenarios in your applications. Okay, so if you're ready to unlock the full potential of useState, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for the next video. And also feel free to drop any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in the comments below. So thank you all for watching and see you in the next video.